Climate change and global warming have become increasingly talked about in the media. In an attempt to gain clarity on the issue, in this video we'll be taking a look into the past and examine increasing temperatures on a long-term global scale. Comparing these to current rates and their effect on a variety of life in the world will help to understand what the future may hold. Greenhouse gases, including carbon dioxide, which can be released by burning fuel, and methane, which is produced mainly by agriculture, are main concerns stemming from the human activity. Increasing concentrations of these gases in the atmosphere contribute to human warming the planet by trapping more of the radiation from the sun.
The concentration of carbon is measured in parts per million. 1 part per million is the same as finding 1 milligram of a substance in a collected kilogram. Concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere today are around 400 parts per million, but we'll be talking about the significance of this level later in comparison with other intervals. A study by KJ Willis and MacDonald, published in 2011, looks at multiple past global warming events and the effect they had on plant life. The conclusions they draw help show the potential future for our planet if human activities continue in this direction.
Over the last 57 million years, there have been several important points where global temperatures and CO2 levels have been comparable or even higher than predicted for the next 100 years. The rate of these past interglacial or global warming events have been just as rapid as we are currently experiencing. There are several important paleoclimatic, meaning past climate records, that provide a framework of information. These reconstructions of the past, using data such as fossil records or rock composition, can help assess the resilience of plants and animals to a warmer world.
Going way back in time, we reached the first of these reconstructed global warming events. This is known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum and took place 56 to 51 million years ago. The PETM is an important warm interval in Earth's history. At the beginning, global temperatures rose by 5 degrees Celsius over only 10,000 years. This rapid warming drove temperatures up until the Eocene climatic optimum was reached. At this point, the global average temperature was between 5 and 10 degrees warmer than present day, and the atmospheric CO2 was also much higher. CO2 concentrations reached 1,200 parts per million, compared to today's 400.
An interesting example of a biological indicator which helped scientists determine peak temperatures at this time is the fossil remains of a giant boyd snake. This fossil has been dated to the beginning of the PETM. With a body length of 13 meters, this is the largest snake ever. The size of a cold-blooded animal, like snakes, is limited by its metabolism, which in turn is limited by external temperatures. A snake of this size would have required a minimum annual temperature of 30 to 34 degrees Celsius to survive. Other good fossil indicators also support this data. Pollen and macrofossils, or fossils of small organic organisms, have also supported this global temperature average. This means that temperatures during the Eocene climatic optimum were 15 to 20 degrees warmer than current day.
The high temperatures of 50 million years ago are comparable with the rapid warming expected over the next century. However, current rapid warming is a direct result of human-driven climate change. The fast warming temperatures during the PETM had a huge impact on the plant and organic life present. However, there was quite a small extinction rate. To show this, we can look at pollen fossil diagrams, showing the number of species present in rock samples from the time. Many plant species were able to persist despite a changing climate, and only a 5% extinction rate was observed. In some areas, there was even an increase in biodiversity, mostly due to the occurrence of new weeds and flowers.
Some regions did experience more substantial extinctions than the global average, but the biggest result of the PETM was large-scale shifts in the range of suitable growing conditions for different plant species. The tropics extended hugely, and the forests became more deciduous. Broadleaf plants were even present at Antarctic and Arctic circles during this time. Plant fossils from several sites across North America indicate that the range for any given plant would have moved north up to 2,000 kilometers during this interval.
Plant species in general had more adaptive features during the Paleocene and Eocene when compared to their current-day counterparts. Many had a much larger ecological tolerance, and high CO2 concentration during this time induced adaptation from these plants, allowing for their persistence. In fact, these much higher carbon levels allowed for an increase in photosynthesis productivity. This process is known as the CO2 fertilization effect.
One of the main problems with examining the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum is that the plants have become less adaptive than they used to be. Over the last 55 million years, plants have evolved numerous times and have become more specialized to a specific ecological niche. To examine if a similar response as seen in the PETM could be forecast in current plant populations, we must examine a more recent warm interval.
The next case study we'll look at is the mid-Pliocene warm interval. This took place 3.6 to 2.6 million years ago. During this time, global temperatures were 2 to 3 degrees warmer than current day. This resulted in many responses similar to those predicted for the next 50 or 100 years, such as atmospheric CO2 concentrations between 360 to 440 parts per million, and sea levels between 15 to 20 meters higher than present day. Like current and predicted climate change, the greatest warming occurred at high latitudes. When you look at plant data from this time interval, the response to the warmth was clearly large-scale range shifts. Plants moved north following the temperature and climate they were accustomed to.
The mid-Pliocene model, when used to predict future climatic scenarios, actually forecasts an increase in plant biodiversity and increased plant growth as northern areas become habitable. However, much of the remaining plant species that migrated were weed species, which can push out less invasive plants. These plant species will have migrated significantly, and the changing land use patterns can lead to extinctions around the equator. To examine responses to a warming climate even further, we will examine a more recent interglacial event.
The third warming interval we'll discuss is known as the Sangamon Interglacial. This event was the last major warming event prior to our current interval, and it occurred 130 to 116,000 years ago. In terms of understanding biotic responses to a warmer climate, the Sangamon Interglacial is particularly interesting. Evidence from ice core data suggests that at this time, global temperatures were about 2 to 4 degrees warmer than present day. Ice sheets were significantly smaller, and sea levels were between 5 to 10 meters higher.
There is a significant amount of fossil evidence from the Sangamon. As well, ice cores can have plant DNA and amino acids extracted from them, giving an idea of the plant composition and range within this interval. There was a less seasonal climate that led to high tree and herb diversity in many regions during this warm interval. However, it also led to significant animal extinction. The large sea level rise greatly reduced land area, restricting the habitat of many animals, and creating greater competition. The extinction of many animals can be seen in the fossil record. Some species did persist through the warming, but experienced a decrease in the habitable zone.
What needs to be considered in the future is whether the predicted rate of climate warming will have an overriding influence. That is, will the rate of global warming we are currently experiencing be too rapid for plants and animals to respawn or relocate? To further address these concerns, we must look at records for the last major warming interval. This is known as the late glacial or post-glacial transition into the Holocene, and extends to only 6,000 years ago.
This warming event is particularly relevant to today's global warming and helps anticipate potential impacts in our future. The difference of global temperature change was 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, a similar magnitude as anticipated in the 21st century warming. Estimates of warming from the post-glacial transition are comparable with data of current global warming. This time period had a jump in carbon concentration, a rise of over 100 ppm in a relatively short time. This forced plants to make changes to their functions, influencing their photosynthesis and ability to use moisture efficiently.
Most of the world's population would have to relocate with only a few meters sea level rise, and the plants and animals that we depend on for survival may not be as adaptable as those of the past. In their study, KJ Willis and MacDonald say that the concerns of current climate change are due to the double cocktail of rapid climate change and greatly reduced ranges, owing to anthropogenic or human activities.
Many plant and animal species no longer have the ability or space required for relocation to a new climate. This study comes to a few final conclusions. We must identify and protect the important and endangered regions, even small populations in niche climates. New conservation measures must be enacted. If anything is clear, there is no room to be complacent. By changing our strategies and enabling persistence, we have the power to save the planet.